I'd like to call the SAU 41 Governing Board meeting on December 16th at 6 p.m. 6:01 to order. Just for everyone's knowledge, this is a meeting of the SAU Governing Board, which is all three of our separate districts meeting together to do the business of the actual SAU governing area. We will not be discussing individual districts' business. At this meeting, we will be discussing the SAU meeting. So I need to appoint a process observer, if I could, please. Yeah, thanks, Tammy. Do we have any agenda adjustments? Okay. I would like to open for public input. The public input for this portion of the meeting will be for everything on the agenda except for the public hearing. We will have a separate public input for the public hearing. So I'm going to ask during public input to limit what you're saying to 3 minutes, to be respectful, to be kind. And Vice Chair Cindy will be timing for 3 minutes. So we are open for public input if anyone is interested.
I live on 3 West Hollis Road, and I've been here for a little less than a year. I did take an opportunity to take a look at the budget for the administrative unit, which I think is the correct title for this. I'm still kind of learning how it all works here in town. And what caught my attention initially, of course, were the 8.2% increase that occurred between 2021 school year and the 21-22 school year.
Mr. Carey, I hate to interrupt you. We are going to talk about the budget during the public hearing.
Well, that's what I wasn't quite sure. And by the way, who said that? Because I can't see people's mouths work anymore. So there's another opportunity to talk about the budget?
Yes, after we get a presentation, we will open it up so that we can have more discussion after it's been presented, if you don't mind.
No, that's absolutely fine with me.
That would be great. Okay. Thank you so much.
This is like my third try to talk about this. Okay,
thank you. Is there any other public input? Okay, I will close public input and reopen it during the public hearing. We have approval of minutes with the following amendments. The minutes are from October 14th, 2021. Members Brown, Jew, and Marsano were absent. Page 6, line 15, replace bus with but. Page 10, line 11, delete ongoing following discussions. Page 12, line 10, insert issue following workforce. Page 12, line 17, replace TOO with TO. Page 12, line 39, replace top with to. Page 14, line 26, positions should be singular. And page 16, line 20, replace the period with a comma. Are there any other adjustments? No? Okay. May I get a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved. Second.
Cindy and who? Second. I'm sorry. Thanks, Carol. Cindy and Carol. Okay. All those in favor? Opposed? And abstain? Thank you. Okay. I didn't count. Would you put up?
1302.
13. Okay. Thank you. That's why we have Gina here. Thank you. Okay, now I need a motion.
Will be,
Oh, I'm sorry, 11:02.
11?
we're going to be too early to,
Oh, we're too early. Okay.
so I will give an update.
Okay. Thank you.
We're running a little bit ahead of schedule, but I wanted to take a moment to just update the board on one piece of information. You may have seen today, early this afternoon, a story on WMUR regarding school threats and the potential plan for tomorrow, December 17th. We became aware of that on Thursday night. We were told and informed it was a non-credible threat, but any type of threat that comes in, I speak to the Hollis Chief of Police and the Brookline Chief of Police. So tomorrow in our schools, we will take what I will say extra precautions using our SROs and other officers periodically throughout the day in Hollis. And in Brookline, we will have repeated tours of our buildings by the patrol officers on duty during the day. It is again, I want to reiterate, a non-credible threat. I was kind of surprised that it made it as a news story. One of the pieces that both chiefs advised me was not to send out a communication to parents for a non-credible threat. They, like me, were a little dismayed that it had been publicized as something. It comes, I guess, from a website that is more of a national website and just continually promotes these different types of pieces of information. We do not believe, in my speaking with Chief Quigley and Chief Hebecki, that this is a legitimate threat. We don't think there's any need to have concern, but as always, we will do our regular preventative measures. And this is when I am very thankful, as always, to work in two towns that continually cooperate with the school district to do whatever we can to make sure that we are prepared for anything that may come about. To that end, I also want to just let the board know that we are actively working with our local towns' safety management groups to look at our communication across the two towns. We are working hard to look at a system that would eliminate the need for phone calls or cell phone calls and just be able to sit here in this gym on a walkie-talkie and communicate to any one of the Hollis schools. You'll be hearing more about that in the coming months, but I would like to thank Dean Napoli. You may recognize Dean's name. He is the real estate person that did the appraisal and the information on the SAU lease that's in your board packet. Dean is also a captain of the fire department and is the emergency management person for the towns. He's coordinating with the Brookline management piece as well as Hollis Dispatch, which serves both towns. The administration at our leadership meeting on Wednesday received a kind of what I'll say our first formal presentation of what they're hoping to do. And it's a very high-level discussion. And what we were really looking to do is coordinate our efforts and be able to go out and seek grants that will allow us to make these changes, hopefully with no cost to the taxpayer. So it was a very exciting discussion. And again, I can't thank the three gentlemen, and two of their names escape me, for all the work they're doing. And I think when we bring it to you in the coming months and you start to see what this will look like, you as well will be very impressed. And again, it's another one of those examples where our communities are always working together to provide for the citizens and our students. So thank you.
Thank you. 6:11. Okay.
I will do. Since we have still a couple minutes before we can officially open the public hearing, I provided each of the board members with an SAU Staff Census, a 5-year trend on one side. That was completed by Kelly, and I'd like to thank her. On the other side is the staffing level when I arrived in 2015 and where we are at the present time. In terms of our budget growth, when I started in 2015, we had 13.6 people employed. We presently have 15.8 people that are represented in the SAU budget. We have done a lot in the last few years of swapping positions because we identified one of our needs was to provide the necessary supports to the business office so that we'd be able to better track budgets, provide regular updates in terms of revenue and expense reports, which we do on a quarterly basis. But when we get to the spring, any budget that is in question or in concern because it's tight, Kelly provide monthly updates there. In terms of the discussion tonight, we will talk about what I would say is the second position that I would be requesting adding since I've been here. The first was our first facilities manager, and as you know, Lance Finnemore joined us this summer. That position is already producing dividends around our capital improvements projects, our project that we just completed during the Hollis summer, the discussions around the potential renovations in the Brookline School District. Having an individual whose focus and expertise is facilities has allowed Kelly and I to focus more on the management side of the project as well as the financial accounting for the project. So I wanted to recognize Lance for all his efforts. And then later tonight, we'll have a discussion around the compliance and communications position. And that is really to address a number of the significant changes that have gone on from a statewide perspective regarding information that we need to now compile and provide to the state. In New Hampshire, we have a lot of discussions almost on a yearly basis of what we affectionately refer to as the unfunded mandates. And again, this is another example in some ways of those unfunded mandates where there are certain surveys and assurances and pieces that are now required that weren't to the same level a number of years back that just continue to occupy more and more time. One of the goals of this position is to allow our assistant superintendent more time to focus in on the curriculum aspects of our districts and less time adhering to the assurances of the federal grants, which we welcome. We're thankful we have them, and we utilize them to the best benefit for our students. So if you have any questions on that census, Kelly and I would be happy to answer that. And then also just, I know some of you are more numbers people than others. So as we get to how the dollar amounts is apportioned for the SAU budget, there is a specific state formula that we have to follow. And I have that calculation for anybody who wants to take home and have some quality reading. We'll make sure that gets included in the minutes for those folks in the community who would like to see that as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
6:15.
Thanks for that information, Andy. Okay, I need a motion that the board recess until the conclusion of the public hearing on the SAU 41 fiscal year 23 budget. Cindy, seconded by Beth. Thank you. We will now receive a presentation by Andy.
Okay. There is our lovely farmhouse that houses our SAU staff. Later on tonight, we're going to talk a little bit about that from a standpoint of future discussions around that building. So we can move to the next slide. Do you have the clicker, Kelly? Okay. The budget subcommittee is made up of myself as the superintendent, Gina Bergskog, assistant superintendent, Kelly Seeley is our business administrator.
Andy, you're turning away from the
Sherman
mic.
is our senior.
Andy, turning away from the mic.
You're turning away from the mic.
Okay. All right. Then, no, what I'll do is I'll read off the paper. Glasses switch. All right. Linda Sherwood is our Senior Assistant Business Administrator. The Treasurer of the SAU Governing Board is Tammy Fareed. The Brookline representative is Karen Jew for the Brookline School Board and Brian Rader for the Brookline Finance Committee. In Hollis, we have Carol Roy as the Hollis School Board rep, and Mike Harris is the Hollis Budget Committee rep. At the co-op, Krista Whalen is the co-op school board rep, and Darlene Mann is the co-op budget committee rep. This budget was developed with those individuals, and we have brought it to both the SAU board at their previous meeting in September, as well as gone over this with each of the individual boards during their meetings, and tonight we make the public presentation of the budget. In terms of our agenda for tonight, we'll do an SAU 41 snapshot. And this is kind of really information I think is critical. We'll talk about the budget comparisons to last year, the budget drivers, the budget components, the budget breakdown by category, the proposed compliance and communication specialist position, the unassigned fund balance, revenue, and budget apportionment by district, and then we have an example of the warrant articles, and then we'll take public comment and questions and answers. The current year operating budget for the entire SAU is $52.9 million combined. It's made up of $1,957,257 for the SAU, $10,527,012 for Brookline. Hollis budget is $14,739,494, and the co-op is $25,668,657. I would just like to remind the board and the taxpayers that in FY21, we returned $3.2 million across the SAU, and in FY20, we returned $1.9 million to the taxpayers based on reductions due to COVID. We have 2,410 students, 436 staff, 695 of our families have volunteers, which we are very grateful for and welcome their participation. We have 97 coaching positions. We have 72 active substitutes, which means they're in our buildings multiple times per week. And the number of invoices processed annually by our business department is about 10,000. Looking at the budget comparisons, in FY22, we adopted a budget of $1,957,257. We're proposing a budget in FY23 of $2,107,176 for a difference of $149,919, or 7.7%. When we compare that to the adjusted budget, and again, for those new to us or listening at home, the adjusted budget is the dollar amount that we would receive if the budget were to fail at the ballot for all three districts. Remember, this is the one article that Hollis, Brookline, and the co-op all vote on, so we don't know the results of that vote until the final district meeting at the end of the year. The adjusted budget is the FY22 approved budget plus any increases due to debt service, contracts, or other obligations previously incurred or mandated, minus any one-time expenditures. So the proposed budget is $2,107,176. The adjusted budget, based on the definition that I gave you, is $2,018,210. So the difference is $88,866. The budget drivers. The first piece is salaries. We are basically strictly personnel. We have very little other costs other than personnel and benefits. So under salaries, we have an increase of $70,192. 45,000 of that is for the new compliance and communications specialist position. 16,000 was for the board-approved salary adjustments. As the board might recall, they were attempting to make sure that we were competitive with some of our neighboring districts so we wouldn't lose staffing. They had voted to put this into the budget so that come merit season as well as salary increase season, which is typically in the spring, they would have the flexibility to either adjust a position that maybe had become out of whack with what is the average around the communities, or if they felt that there needed to be an adjustment based on performance. All staff were budgeted at a 3% increase. Almost all the SAU contracts have a range of a low of 2% increase to a high of 4%, so we typically budget at the 3%. The benefits component is an increase of $64,042. Again, $32,555 of those benefits are for the new compliance and communications specialist position. Our health insurance rate was a 3.9% increase, and we have 2 health insurance membership changes. What that means is we have 2 individuals at the SAU who will be joining us for health insurance come next fall. That's a requirement. They're full-time employees with us, so that is the other portion that is included in that $64,042. In terms of equipment and software, we're looking for 4 new desktops and 1 laptop for an increase of $5,025. FY23 budget components, the salaries component, as I said, is the major component of the SAU budget, as we're very personnel heavy, is $1,399,563 for 64%. The benefits component is $602,683 for 29%, and the other 7%, or $164,930, is a variety of smaller accounts. Salaries and benefits make up 93% of our total budget. When we look at the budget categories, we compare FY22 to FY23 and provide you with the dollar change. So our wages in FY22 were $1,246,750. We're proposing $1,316,942 for a $70,192 change. The benefits, $538,641 in FY22 to $602,683 for a change of $64,042. Equipment and software, last year we budgeted $11,450, but based on equipment upgrade, we're requesting $16,475 for a difference of $5,025. Professional development was budgeted last year at $20,700. This year we're proposing $23,565. We have a new director of technology, and we felt it was critical to provide the support in terms of professional development, so that is the bulk of that $2,865 increase. Last year, the board was gracious and awarded $20,108 of merit increases across the SAU. This year, we are proposing $22,621 for $2,513. Those are board controlled. They are placed in the budget, but are earned merit bonuses and may or may not be awarded. Operations and maintenance, we budgeted $55,808 last year. We're proposing $58,290. So an increase of $2,482. That allows us to continue to deal with some of the issues that we do face living in an old farmhouse. Expendables, $14,600, increasing to $16,500 for a $1,900 increase. That's all paper and supplies and everything that we need to produce the required documents and things, and most of that is just part of what we are seeing with inflation. Services, $32,650. We're proposing $33,450 for an $800 increase. Travel is $16,550. We're proposing $16,650 for a $100 increase. That travel is associated with mileage for our staff members who need to attend the various state meetings and that. We reimburse for mileage there, or if somebody was to attend a conference. And again, all of that is with board approval. So the total for FY22 was $1,957,257. FY23, we're proposing $2,107,176 for that $149,919 increase, or 7.7%. The bulk of our increase is I am proposing a compliance and communications specialist. This need is identified based on the increasing demands for compliance documentation and other communication matters, which is absorbing a significant time of senior district leadership and cutting into the time needed to carry out their primary functions of educational and fiscal management. What has happened, which is not a negative, we have been asked and required by the state to do much more around assurances, monitoring of grants, a number of things that have to be done during our audits. There are a number of surveys around staffing, around salaries, and each of those needed to be completed by either the assistant superintendent or myself. We believe this compliance position will help us to address many of those required pieces that need to be done in moving those to this individual's primary focus with support from both Gina and I. The salary and benefits for this position is $77,555. It's made up of $45,000 worth of salary, $32,555 worth of benefits. That's your health insurance, your New Hampshire Retirement, your dental, and your life insurance. So those would primarily make up that total. This is considered a support position in our budget. It's not considered a senior management position. The goal of the position is to generate compliance documentation and to provide assistance to the superintendent and assistant superintendent in conveying important required information regarding the school district to the Department of Education, school boards, the school community, and the members of the public. There are also a number of pieces, and I'll give you a recent example. We just, as a district, went through phase 1 of our suicide prevention training. That's required for every staff member, every bus driver, every custodian, every paraprofessional to do 2 hours mandatory training. All that has to be logged, documented, and entered into compliance for the state of New Hampshire. And there are a number of those requirements, which again, are not a negative, but just have become very time-consuming. The proposed compliance and communication specialist, the general duties. They will assist with completion of annual DOE data submission requirements, assist the assistant superintendent with the communication and execution of state and federal grant requirements, which include general assurances, program assurances, the GEPA statement, time and effort reporting, and/or stipend work agreements. Assist with coordination of information for the annual town reports, district reports, notice, memoranda, and other correspondence. They will support leadership with response to inquiries, complaints, and requests. They will assist the Director of Technology with compliance requirements. An example of that is the E-rate funding. For those of you who aren't familiar, we receive E-rate funding for our internet services and things of that nature. That requires us to have protective services and filters and all of those pieces, and that compliance person would be working with the Director of Technology to make sure that is all in place for each student within the district. We would assist with coordination and maintenance of district website and social media platforms in the absence of a paper media. One of the things that we had talked about last year as an SAU board is our newspapers have basically gone away. So we have access to school newsletters, we have access to our websites, when we can, utilize social media, but there are an awful lot of tremendous positive events that go on within our SAU that we sometimes omit getting the word out. So we also look at this position as to further enhance the accomplishments of our students, because they're doing some remarkable things. The FY23 budget unassigned fund balance. When revenue exceeds expenses at year end, the balance goes into this unassigned fund balance. So the FY22 beginning balance was $171,438. We do not have a projected use of the fund balance, so we project the ending balance to be $171,438. We do not have a projected use of the fund balance for FY23, so we're projecting that at $171,438. Long before I arrived, a formula was set up, and the budget committees, the boards, the SAU board decided that they would like to keep a unassigned fund balance with a minimum of 7% and a maximum of 10%. So those target ranges are placed at the chart below, and the $171,438 is an 8.1% balance in that account. What this would be potentially used for, we would potentially need to go to these funds if, unfortunately, we had somebody that needed to take a leave and we needed to bring somebody new on board, or if there was expended expense regarding SAU functions or things of that nature. And that is where we would, again, go to the SAU board. A public hearing would be required, and we would make our case for why we believe we needed to go into the unreserved fund balance, and the board would be able to approve or deny that request. The FY23 budget revenue, from the grants, which we oversee, we get indirect cost totaling $4,000. So the total revenue for the SAU is $4,000. The FY23 budget apportionment. The apportionment is done by a state formula that is provided to the business manager, and then we submit the numbers and arrive at the following distribution. So in 2021 to 2022, you see the expenses of $1,957,257. We take the $4,000 of revenue out, and we have the total to be apportioned of $1,953,257. We do the same thing in 22-23, taking out the $4,000 of revenue, so we need to apportion $2,103,176. So we have provided you with the breakdown from 21-22, 22-23, and it breaks down as follows. Brookline's share of apportionment of the SAU budget this year would go from $361,236 to $407,208 for 19%. Hollis would go from $594,122 to $625,021 for 30%. The co-op would go from $997,899 to $1,070,947 for 51%. So you see the total apportionment there. The distribution is determined by a calculation using the equalized valuation as provided by the state and the average daily membership of students. So that's how that formula is arrived at. Next, we have the wording for the proposed warrant. Shall the voters of Hollis, Brookline, and the Hollis Brookline Cooperative School District adopt a school administrative unit budget of $2,103,176 for the forthcoming fiscal year, in which those X's would be replaced by the apportioned dollar amount, or whatever the final number is that the board arrives at tonight, is assigned to the school budget of this school district. This year's adjusted budget of $2,103,176 $18,210 with the portion assigned to the school budget of this school district will be adopted if the article does not receive a majority vote of all the school district voters voting in this school administrative unit. The Budget Committee either does or does not recommend this appropriation, and the school board does or does not recommend this appropriation. And at that point, we'd be happy to turn it back over to the chair, and if we can, assist with any questions.
Thank you, Andy, for that presentation. I am going to open this up for public input. I'd like to reiterate again, we welcome everyone's public input. We are going to ask that you keep it to a limit of 3 minutes. Vice Chair Cindy Van Konen is going to put a timer on, and at the end of 3 minutes, I'm going to ask you to wrap it up. So if anyone is interested in public input, please keep it polite. Please keep it respectful. Welcome to come up to the microphone. Please state your name and your address.
David Perry, 3 West Hollis Road in Hollis. As I mentioned, a new resident, Hollis, as of March this year. I had a chance to review some of the material prior to the meeting and the presentation, and the things that jumped out at me, a little bit about my background. I was a not-for-profit executive. I was an executive director, so I understand budgets, and I've developed budgets and implemented budgets. I did have one question about the budget, that it's budgeted for 21, 22, and I understand we're not done with that school year, but can we get some idea on how it stands year to date or projected? Is that what it looks like it's going to be?
Sure. I'd be happy to answer that. In this packet tonight that was posted online, you'd see the expense and revenue report that we're going to talk about later on in the meeting, and we're looking at a $20,000 surplus at the present time.
Surplus, you said?
Yes.
Oh, okay. No, that's helpful. I know sometimes you're already blown out of budget when you're at this point in the year, and there are other times you say, we're going to be well under, which has a big impact on the 2022-2023 budget picture, or could have a big. One thing I noted in the material, if we go back to, actually this was not in the presentation, but looking at some of the previous budgets going back to 18-19, the school year ending at that point, I don't know if any of you know what the increase is from that point 4 years ago to 2022, the 2023 budget. It's actually 37.5%. It's $575,000 increase from 2018 and 2019. That is a monstrous increase. I know part of it is two new positions when we're talking about this current budget, but I'm here to say you need to be very careful about something that's the elephant in the U.S. economy right now, and it's inflation. There's 6 to 10% right now, and that's going to eat up all of that money that you've allocated for a new position, and then some. And the one thing I can tell you that is not going up at the rate of inflation is my pension. In 2014, it was X amount, and when I die, it's going to be that amount again. So you don't obviously make a school budget around me, but there are lots of people who are going to be hurt by huge increases, which translate into tax increases that will drive. That's what drove me out of my home, the state of Connecticut. I lived there for 50 years. I worked there for a good part of my career, but I left. It was the first time in my life I left a place. I moved many places. I moved to New Jersey on purpose. I moved to Massachusetts on purpose. I moved back to Connecticut on purpose because I had a goal. This goal this time was to escape the oppressive environment that I had in that state. I came to New Hampshire because I want to live free or die. And I'm really serious about that. That's why I'm here.
That's 3 minutes, if you could just wrap it up.
Yeah, there's just one thing about the positions that I haven't seen, I heard a little bit about, and that is sometimes a new position will either reduce costs in a real way, or they'll increase income that offset the cost of those positions. If that's what we're talking about here, and you can document that as part of the budget, then, let's go for it. But if that's more of a, and I understand when you're overwhelmed with administrative garbage, because I've been there, but I also had to do it. And there are times we just, it's just part of the deal. So that's where I'm coming from. Inflation is going to be killing us. It's going to kill the school budget. I don't know what the inflationary factor is. That's maybe my last question. Is there an inflationary factor in your budget?
It's not from a set percentage, but
Yeah.
we are looking at the increases that we've seen in costs as we budget for the future.
Okay. I guess that's all I have to say, other than we have to be really careful about increasing because we haven't seen anything yet.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Hello,
Hi.
Sue Hamola, Mendelson Drive. Thank you for the presentation, Superintendent Corey. With regard to that position, I'm wondering if the purpose of it is to do administrative work, couldn't it be more cost effective if we used a temp agency? There's long-term temp agencies. Just doing some quick math, if we had to pay somebody $20 an hour for 40 hours a week, full-time year-round, that would cost $38,000. That's a half cost right there. And at that point, if things change in the future and maybe there's not as many right-to-know requests or some of the compliance programs change slightly, now you're not on the hook for a whole person in a position. I'm just wondering, why are we considering that in any way? And if we aren't, why not?
We have used temp agencies we have used temp agencies in the past, sometimes with success and sometimes it hasn't gone that well. In terms of the temp agencies right now, there is a shortage everywhere for bodies. And most people are looking for permanent positions, and we don't know how successful we would be going through a temp agency. In terms of the amount of work, the work has existed for multiple years now, and we intentionally did not go in this direction, even though we had board members as probably far back as 5 or 6 years ago recommending that we needed to move in this direction. If the board were to want to go in that direction, we would, as an SAU, would be happy to do that and make that work. The other piece is, as you know, sometimes with the temp agencies, they have now started to provide benefits, so the cost of the person is not as cheap as it used to be. And then number two, if you find somebody and they're a home run, the temp agency usually has a fee to them to secure that person if that's who you want to hire.
Okay, and if I could follow on, the cost of the position is $77,000. If you're looking for somebody to do administrative work, generally that position is around anywhere from $38,000 to say $52,000 per year. Why $77,000?
The salary is $45,000.
So that's the with benefits cost.
It's the benefits package, which is made up of a health insurance plan, which again, a family plan could be somewhere between $20,000 and $24,000. A two-person plan is probably around, $16,000. You have your health and your dental. You have New Hampshire Retirement, which we all know that a number of years back, the state decided they would no longer contribute to New Hampshire Retirement and put that all on the local taxpayers. I always find it kind of interesting. It's the state of New Hampshire's retirement and they don't pay for it. So that's where that large piece comes in is the benefits package.
So wouldn't it at that case then, because there's issues with the state retirement, why create one more vulnerability? I mean, if there's an option, I know you said that maybe it's difficult to get a temp agency or long-term, but I would think that would be a $38,000 savings just to try it. We're making an assumption that it's just not going to work. And I do agree with Mr. Perry as he was saying that I think we're headed for some very significant financial strain. And it would be at this point, I would be thinking that we batten down the hatches a little bit and look and see how we can come out of the gate more modestly versus maybe come out of the gate more idealistic about what we'd like to do. But that's just my thoughts. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Michelle St. John, Orchard Drive in Hollis. Thanks, Mr. Corey, for your presentation. It was really helpful. A couple of comments that I wanted to make. One was that in what the previous gentleman had said, historic numbers don't tell the story of the history. And if you follow what has happened with the SAU and the hiring of the facilities director, I think was led to be prudent to keep these buildings running. We have several really old buildings, and I think there's some historical context that needs to be taken into place. And I think that was a really wise decision to make that hire. I also want to make a comment about this new position, which I support. In fact, I was one of the people who recommended this position many years ago. And I would like to just say, as someone who works in the communications field, it's a steal at that price. Literally someone who's going to be spending that time and enhancing your communications on top of those compliance requirements. It's a lot of work for a very small amount of money. I also wanted to make a comment about attrition and the volume of work that's being put on our administration. And so I think, again, that's another prudent reason for adding this position on. We have a great team. We have an excellent district with wonderful leadership. And I would hate to think that these countless, you could, Andy and Gina, you want to tell us how much time you spend doing that component and how much time that would free up. That might help people to conceptualize by the time it goes to district meeting. But overall, I think it's great, so thank you.
Thank you. All right. Not seeing anyone more for public input. I think we can come out of our recess and back into our regular meeting. Do we want to have our board discussion now, or do we want to do it during deliberations?
That's totally up to you, Madam Chair.
Let's have our board discussion now, after we've just had the presentation. So I will open it up for discussion.
Madam Chair, I had a question to follow on something Ms. Homola asked that I frankly did not understand personally, and I wonder if I might ask it. Can you explain, Andy, why the position has a pension?
I can't hear you, Tammy, I'm sorry.
Can you explain why, there it is, the position includes a pension?
A full-time employee.
I'm so sorry.
A full-time employee, whether it be a teacher or administrator or custodian, administrative assistant, is entitled to state benefits under the New Hampshire Retirement Plan.
So that's a state law, that's not a board-level decision?
That is correct. It's a state retirement plan.
Excellent, thank you. Thank you. I just wanted you to hear my question because I wanted to hang on that. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Tom?
I just want to say up front, I realize I'm speaking to the board chair and to the board members officially. But much of what I'd like to say are my comments and beliefs that I would like to have available to members of the public that may be listening or listening in the future. My background is as an engineer. I have a background in economics, so I'm used to looking at data. But I also have a background in sales. I've been involved with technical sales for over 20 years. And I know that you can use numbers and statistics to make all kinds of pictures and images. And I think that there's been some misleading information put out over the recent past and years past by using percentages for small amounts and dollars for big numbers. So it's important to look at the big picture. For many years, people have come to the mic and they've written that the school budgets are unsustainable. But the history tells a different story. They have been sustained, and our communities have actually supported the budgets while home sales have remained very strong in our communities. So it may not be desirable, but to say it's unsustainable, there's no evidence that that's true, good or bad. It's just a fact. In the case of the SAU budget, not only is the budget increase sustainable, but it's to the advantage of the taxpayers. So we've got a total budget in the SAU, as was broken down, of upwards of $50 million. That's for all the school districts and the SAU. Of that, about $2 million is for the SAU administrative functions that we're talking about tonight. So the SAU is approximately 4% of the total cost that we're looking at. And a 10% increase in the SAU budget represents a 0.4% increase in the total school budget, the total of what our communities are talking about. So that number, the 8%, even the 30% that was highlighted, in the scope of the entire operation of our schools, still represents a relatively small portion of what we pay in total. And my opinion, and I think it would be supported by examination, is that investing in the SAU, we get economies of scale through central management of contracts, facilities, special education, our benefits programs, HR, purchasing, and on and on. And for years and years, there was heavy pressure from the community. Why aren't we combining resources? Part of it was we were understaffed at the SAU office to look at all these things. Now, with the additional assistant business administrators, with the facilities manager, with the assistant director of special education, we now have the resources in the SAU office to do this consolidated economies of scale work. So I think as we consolidate and centralize these activities, we generally see equal or greater reductions among the individual districts. Now, we can't control prices that increase over time. That's not something that the board gets to decide. And we must comply with state and federal requirements that have multiplied administrative and reporting costs. It's been tremendous, and some of them have been noted tonight, but those are things beyond our control. We have to deal with them. And the demands from the community for increased communication, the right to know requests that we get, several recent lawsuits on topics that fortunately the majority of them have ruled in our favor, but they still represent costs that we have to deal with. So these are additional costs that we have to cover. So some of the increase in personnel, it's not beneficial to the students, but it must be there to fulfill legal obligations. So most of the objections to our budgets, they're not really objections to the budget, to how we're operating the school. Most of them are objections to the tax impact. I mean, if someone were to come in, if Jeff Bezos moved into town and offered to cover our budget, I don't think anyone would care what we spent. But where it's showing up on our tax bills, it's the tax impact that are really getting people cranked up. So again, looking at the data, our costs are generally below average statewide and nationally. It's our funding mechanisms in New Hampshire that create both an equity among taxpayers and the impression that schools are overly costly. So for the SAU budget, the easy way to lower cost is to become one school district. Now we have 6 labor contracts. We must file 4 times as much paperwork for many of our obligations as we would if it was a single district and single SAU. We have to manage 4 budgets and duplicate, triplicate, quadruplicate meetings and other activities. So if people really want to find a way to lower the cost of operating the SAU, it's time to look at, I've said this before, switch to one school district and the workload will drop. There is no legal or technical barrier, but it must be driven by the citizens because they're the ones who decide how we structure it. As far as making the tax burden more equitable, that can only be addressed at the state or town level. The SAU and the school districts do not control the way taxes are assessed within each town. But if anyone wants to tackle that one, contact me offline. I've got some ideas on that too. I support the budget. I support the new position. I'm sorry it's been characterized or appeared as administrative. I understand the thought process, and it's really much more than an administrative position. It is an administration position, but this is a standalone position, someone with developed skills, the kind of skills that if you were to contract out as an independent business, you would be charged probably between $100 and $150 per hour. This is not someone who's just going to take the notes and get them published. This is someone to, in the marketing world, generate content. And content generation, especially in the context of the legal requirements placed upon the district, is a highly technical, highly skilled position. And if you can fill this at the rate that you're proposing, and I'm not saying you can't, I'm not disputing that. If you can, you're getting a bargain. And I support that completely. Thank you.
Hear, hear.
Thank you. Any other, who wants to follow Tom?
May I speak to something Tom said and to a previous speaker said?
Tammy, can you put,
May I address Tom's points? One point he made?
can you what? I'm sorry.
May I address a point Tom made?
Oh, of course.
Tom, you said, and it echoes something one of the speakers said, I'm sorry, I've forgotten who, maybe both, and that is the idea that this position or even any of the positions at the SAU neither generate income nor generate savings. Unfortunately, state agencies aren't in the income generation or income savings business. We're in the business of efficient delivery of services. With respect to this particular position, if folks had an opportunity to work directly with the staff at the SAU, I have on occasion been able to volunteer my time to make photocopies for Right to Know, et cetera, because I'm properly background checked, et cetera. You would understand that what this job is a savings through opportunity cost. When we have a superintendent and an assistant superintendent who are genuinely among the best talent anywhere, standing at photocopiers, that is a massive waste of taxpayer funds. When we have the right tool for the right job at the right cost, to Tom's point about the value of this particular position, the taxpayer and the students, Tom, are getting the superintendent and the assistant superintendent's expert attention in the fields for which we pay them, and the person then appointed to do this other role is absorbing costs that we are, or better, absorbing loss of value from these other people who could be doing much higher level work.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I'd like,
Ken?
yeah, if I
Sure.
could. So I'm going to be a bit of a dissenting voice here. I agree with everything that's stated, and I just want to make that clear. I support this position in theory, and I've been behind this. The concern, I think, wearing my Brookline hat right now, is knowing the budget cycle that we're going through and what's going to be coming our way this year. And the point, Tom, that you made, while I agree with you, it also stands out to me that it shows the percentage increase, and that number is something that will be out there. In Brookline, we're going to see a fairly significant increase in our budget that we cannot control this year due to cost growth driven primarily by special ed will be significant. We also have a renovation that's needed, quite frankly, because of the growth management. And to me, that's a priority for the Brookline school system this year to support the growth that we've seen. We've hired 2 teachers, and we need to make classroom space for the students because of the size increase that we've seen across Brookline. So while I support this in theory, my concern is with a position like this and the SAU, it's if you put a business hat on, it's overhead. And overhead is traditionally one of the first areas you look at when you're having some cost concerns. And I believe wearing the Brookline hat, we do have that this year, and we have a lot of needs, and money can only go so far. So while I agree with this, the need for it and all of the goodness that comes with it from a cost standpoint, I just don't think, at least from this year for me, I can't support it simply because of the reason I just talked about. Like prioritization, those pieces come first for the student population and what we're seeing in Brookline.
Thank you. Anyone else have any comments?
I have a couple questions around the salary and how we came to that. Could you maybe speak to some of in some detail around how you came to the $45,000 salary, and how does that compare to maybe other districts that have this position, and what is that salary price point that those districts are at?
We talked with a couple of New Hampshire districts that have similar positions, if not identical, maybe slightly different names, and one district in Massachusetts. We feel that this salary and benefits package is what I would call typical of an entry level. Somebody who would be coming to the position relatively new. This is not somebody who's going to go out and make $100 to $150 an hour based on their credentials. But we feel that between our ability to work with the individual, whether it's on the business side of the house through Kelly's offices, curriculum, instruction, and assessment under Gina, or myself, that we're willing to train that individual, bring them along, and develop this individual, knowing full well that, you know, in a 3 to 5 year commitment, they may move on and we may do this again. It's not the only position we do that for. We train an awful lot of administrators that come here and then leave us for other districts and go on to be very successful. Some leave and come back, and we get that bonus because it's a great place to work. So I think it's competitive. I think it may be difficult to fill, not because of the salary and the benefits, but because of just the tight labor market that is out there. I am not opposed to looking at different alternatives if that's what the board feels is best. You know, as we've always done, whatever you provide for us, we will make it work.
Mm-hmm. So I think, you know, some concerns I have is the ability to capture or the talent at that level. I tend to feel that we need somebody that can drop into the role, that can bring immediate value and not have a 2 or 3 year runway to get sharp in the position. I understand the reason for maybe attracting entry level, but I see this role as fairly strategic and in many ways can be at the center of a firestorm where there's some sort of communications to the public. When you think about the monies and grants that are trying to be captured for the district, I see this as a pretty substantial role. And at the 45,000 salary level, I'm a little concerned about what kind of talent we're going to attract to the position, because I'm looking for, if we're going in this direction, I'm looking for someone that can drop in the role and provide maybe not 100% value on day one, but certainly not 10% on day one, because we're saying we need someone in this role to help take the pressure and workload off of our highest and most strategic people in our SAU. I keep thinking about the example that Ms. Fareed brought up. I don't want my superintendent standing at the printer, spending all the afternoon or the entire day doing something like that. That is not an efficient way to operate an SAU under any measure. So I would just ask my colleagues here, does the $45,000 salary really ring correct? I mean, I want to be sensitive to analysis that has been done. I appreciate that, and I very much appreciate the slides. This was a great presentation. It was very consumable, very easy to understand. I want to avoid next year having to do a big forklift on this position to maybe right-size the role. So I don't know what the right number is. I'm just, I mean, if we as a group say no, 45 is okay, I can support that, but I'm just a little concerned about the talent that we're going to attract. Oh, and I did a quick calculation. So at the 70,192, I think the number was. So typically when you apportion generally runs at about 35.65 Hollis to Brookline. And you apportion that salary at what's being presented right now, it's $45,624 to Hollis and $24,567 to Brookline to cover this position.
Liz, did you have something?
I was listening to public comment as I was on my way.
Can you put it closer?
Yeah, I was listening to public comment, and I think what struck me is sort of the sentiment of our administrators who have had a huge responsibility in the last 2 years, not that they didn't have a huge job before, should somehow just sort of suck it up and continue to suck it up and just do whatever's necessary to do their job and the job of several others. And I am concerned about attrition, and I'm concerned that we're going to lose our top talent. And when we lose this top talent, it is going to cost us a heck of a lot more than $45,000 a year to replace Andy and Gina. And I've been here long enough to see burnout amongst professionals that we've worked with for years. And if you can't identify it, come and watch them a little bit more, because you ought to be capable of identifying burnout. So there's some level of respect here for them asking for this at this time. I will tell you, I am somebody who probably came to Andy 5-6 years ago and pressed very hard, because this is a position that other districts and our district down the road in Amherst has. They have administrative assistants. They have for their superintendents who do those types of things that this person would be doing. This is not unheard of for us to have somebody in this role. We are really just becoming like the other districts around us. How we've been able to perform without this is sort of a mystery to me. We've been doing it because we overwork the people that we have, and we've gotten lucky and had some other folks who were willing to pitch in, and we've had some extra administrative assistants who were willing to pitch in, and lots of people that were doing jobs that wasn't within their job description at all. So I think this is probably cheap money. Whether $45,000 is going to get us the perfect candidate or not, I think it's going to get us some help. I think it may keep us the ability to keep our folks in the SAU who are now seeking this help. That statement alone is very important. They are asking for help. What we should do as board members and as community members is try to support them when they've asked for assistance. When somebody says, I've got too much and I need assistance, and they've never asked for that before, in that way, you have to listen to them.
Thank you.
Andy, earlier today, you...
Tammy, sorry. I just haven't had a chance. I want to jump in.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, I just want a little clarification in terms of some of what I've heard described of what's going to be offloaded. Seems like a lot of the clerical things when we're talking about, the photocopying and stuff. And so that seems congruent with the 45,000. And perhaps I'm wondering, are there specialized skills, training, talent that the person that we're seeking would need, or is it more of someone that can take direction, readily take direction to offload work that isn't appropriate for our administrators to be doing? And I guess I just need some clarification to understand for myself whether or not I think that 45,000 price point is appropriate to attract the type of person we need.
I think it's a little bit of both. I think the first year in the position, it will be offloading tasks based on the person's skill set. In terms of, it may be assisting with meeting prep, those type of things. But many of the pieces that we're talking about regarding compliance are very time consuming. And let me give you one of the most mundane but time-consuming tasks is when we have to go in and identify all our staff across the SAU, bachelor's, master's, advanced degrees, and collate that, put it all together, and then calculate the average salary of each district for those individuals. So there are tasks like that I would say absolutely fit into the $45,000 price range. That would be a huge benefit to both Gina and I. There are tasks that we deal with in HR in terms of the amount of work that goes around fingerprints and volunteers. I mean, we made a conscious decision that everybody that comes into our schools is fingerprinted and background checked, and that has grown to 600 and some odd hundred people. And every time you go to a new district, we repeat the process because legally you haven't been approved for that district. So you leave Hollis and you go to the co-op, or you leave Brookline, you go to the co-op. We do that process again from a legal standpoint and insurance standpoint, so we have to monitor all that. Another piece is we monitor all professional development. So everything comes through Gina, and it has to meet the criteria to be given approval. And many times, Gina and I, now Gina, used to be the two of us, would spend time sending it back because X, Y, or Z was missing. And that is very time consuming when you think of the number of professional developments across the SAU. In terms of where the growth would come in, the skill set of the person with regard to communication. I would hope maybe we get lucky and they can craft a document that would be acceptable to the public to address the situation. That may not be the case, and we may spend some professional development working with our attorneys and different people. And I will tell you that we have a gentleman who lives in our community, who's recently retired, who is an executive in this type of position, who has already volunteered to mentor anybody that we hire, so that we're not putting a mentoring piece on Gina or I. And that's always been one of the things in our communities that has amazed me. They know what we're going to do, and I think he is looking for something to do. He's not necessarily ready to fully retire. So we'll be reaching out to him. But we're hoping that, you know, like with regards, I didn't send a message out, as I said to you earlier, regarding the non-credible threat today. But over time, it would be great for this person to grow into the role to either have a database of different type of letters that we've used in the past, that they could easily pull up and be adjusted, or to be able to craft that response to a situation that comes up. So I kind of agree with both you and Rob. There are tasks that at the beginning would make this a definite $45,000 position. What I think over time this position would grow. And I think if I was somebody talented and new into the communications and compliance profession, this would be a job that I could really expand my horizon for the next 3 to 5 years, and then maybe I move on. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. You know, as I said, we train administrators for a variety of roles. Sometimes what happens, they come here, like a lot of us, and they get to meet the people. And the people are the reason why we have staff spend, you know, like Mr. Fox, 53 years this year. You know, there's a reason for that. It's not just our kids, it's the adults, it's the kids, and it's everybody in our community.
Thank you.
Brooke picked up on what I was going to ask exactly,
Yeah,
so I
all
appreciated
right.
that. Earlier today, Andy, when you were talking with some of us, you mentioned that there are 10...
older and older.
Earlier today, when you were talking with some of us right before the meeting, you mentioned there are 10 open superintendent positions across the state, and that those districts are really struggling to fill them. We know that hiring has become extremely difficult. Again, it goes back to opportunity cost, what Liz mentioned, what Tom mentioned, the value of retaining our highly skilled, you know, we've got you trained where we want you, and we don't want to lose you and have to train a new one. So the opportunity cost of having that attrition, that loss, is the equivalent of savings. It's the equivalent of generation of value. And when you said that about the 10 open superintendent positions, some of them in districts like ours, some of them in smaller, some in larger, and that many of those positions are that we know have recently been filled by folks who don't have your number of years, but the market is offering them, you know, is desperate for labor. I think that if, as many have said, if you can find somebody excellent, like a new teacher who's newly minted, some of the teachers that we hire have previous experience, but some are newly minted. And if we're hiring for talent and potential, I can see where both Rob and Brooke's points can come together in the development of talent. Everybody here was new at one time.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak? I would just like to say a few words. You know, and part of this is for the public, and because we all know this. This is an incredibly difficult district to manage and to run. And we have 6 different unions. We have 3 different budgets, well, 4 different budgets with the SAU. And we have the staff, the same amount of staff as most districts that are K through 12 that don't have any of these issues in addition to it. Our SAU, our administration, and our staff stayed open during a year that most schools in the country, not just in New Hampshire, not in New England, but in the country closed. But our administration and our staff felt that it was so important for our students to have the option to come into school, as well as stay home if they felt safer doing it that way. And we're able to work with our unions and to get our staff to say, sure, we'll room and Zoom, we'll do what's best for our kids too. And I know we've said congratulations and said thank you a million times, but that can't go unnoticed, because during that year, I think they worked tirelessly. And we just, again, it was reacting and just trying to keep up. You guys worked, I would say, probably 7 days a week. Maybe sometimes you get a day off, and we gave you 6 days a week. But all of you on that SAU staff, I mean, you constantly were working. And we also saw, and that needs to be commended, and we need to keep moving forward. with that kind of vision that we have, that you guys have, to put students first, to do what is best for students, I don't want to have the time of the administration, of our SAU administration, taken up with things that aren't moving us forward and a vision for our students. We hear over and over and over again that we certainly hear Andy, we hear Gina, we hear constantly what's best for the students, what's best for the students, what's best for the students. That is the priority. That's what is taken care of and what's handled first. And that's where I would like to have your expertise and your effort going towards. We have spent, or we, I say you guys have spent the last year and a half, 2 years handling, reacting very well, putting out fires, and looking around for more and moving forward as best we can. We need to move forward now, and we need to have someone that can help give some more communication and help you guys both administratively as well as in the communication realm, so that you don't have to spend your time doing some of the obligations that are coming from the state, some of the obligations that you already have. I fully support this. We brought the facilities manager on last year, and I believe that saved us so much money that we didn't have to pay in general contractors, and certainly didn't have to pay in you running around and checking, and Kelly running around and having to learn about all sorts of things that she doesn't want to learn about. So I fully support this, and I appreciate the situation that the Brookline district is in, and I really do appreciate it. But I do support this position and the number. And I hear what Rob is saying, and I don't know if there's any way, and we can talk about it now or we can talk about it in deliberations, whether we keep the salary where it is, and then if we need to go to the unfunded, if you guys are interviewing people, if this passes and you're interviewing people, and we get to the point where, like, boy, we are going to have to probably up at 10 or 20 for that particular year, use that money to fund that particular thing. I know what Rob's saying, we don't want to get ourselves in a situation next year, but I just thought maybe that would give us some opportunity. So those are my thoughts. Does anyone else have thoughts?
Well, that point you made about using the unassigned fund balance, we did do that for the facilities director position in the budget that year that we assigned money for the hire. We did have a line item that allowed us, I think it was Tom who recommended it, to, as kind of a transparency matter, this is a slush fund. If you really can't make your proposed budget, salary attract the kind of talent you need, we should have an item where you could go to it, and that would explain to the public why you went there. Mm-hmm. But if you don't go to it, it goes back into the fund. Okay. So that's got some history.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? All right, we can move on to fiscal year 2022.
Turn it over to Linda.
Oh, okay. All right. So I will keep this short and sweet. This is a snapshot in time of our expenses and revenue for SAU 41. And in our expense budget, for the most part, we spend in the business office quite a bit of the beginning of the fall encumbering or creating purchase orders for the year. And at this point in time, we're saying that out of our budget, $7,000 in that budget we won't spend, basically. Out of the $7,000, $5,000 of that is basically due to the turnover we've had in the office manager position. On the revenue side, we're showing a balance of $14,850, and the majority of that was something we didn't expect. On the line that is the health trust surplus, that was unexpected. That's a return of surplus funds we get from Health Trust, who is the vendor we use for our health and dental insurance. And we have a surplus of funds from their Health Trust risk pool where they're giving actually money back to each district. So the SAU itself is receiving $12,850 out of that health trust risk pool. So if we add the $7,000 that we're saying we're not going to spend on the expense side with the $14,000 on the revenue side, that gives us a balance of $22,035. And then down at the bottom of the report, we would update the fund balance to show out of the beginning balance of the year, $171,438. If we add the $22,035 to that, it gives us a fund balance at the end of this fiscal year of $193,473, which is still within our target range of the 7 to 10%. It puts us right at 9.9% actually of our expense budget. So for the most part, we're right on track, and we're only halfway through the year. A lot could change, but as of right now, I think the numbers look solid.
Okay, great.
Are there any questions?
Thank you.
Earlier, we had a public comment from a gentleman who was new to town, and now I've forgotten exactly the point he made, and it made me want to remind everyone of something we learned a few years back during a correction that we all learned from. An SAU is not a school district, and it's not a town agency. It's its own municipal corporation. So if we underspend, we can't return tax money to the taxpayer. There's no mechanism in state law to allow us to do that. The 7 to 10% range that's mentioned in these presentations and that Linda just mentioned, if I remember right, when I served on the Hollis Budget Committee through our ex officio seat, now held by Carol, it's the New Hampshire DRA, the Department of Revenue Administration, that establishes the recommendation, the recommended guideline to municipalities, school districts, et cetera, well, not school districts, but SAUs, to attempt to retain somewhere between 7 and 10% as a safety measure when there's unassigned funds. And so that range is not something derived by school boards, although it's something we adopted by recommendation. It is something that was generated at the state level from, New Hampshire's version of the IRS.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Okay, thank you. Moving on, the SAU Committee, Lease Committee update.
I would be happy to start, and then either Karen, Rob, or Liz can feel free to jump in. As you are probably aware from your local board meeting, we were fortunate enough to have Dean Navaroli, and I apologize, Dean, if I'm saying that wrong, volunteer as a community member to work in his professional capacity to look at the SAU building in the barn and determine what was the best path forward. So in your packet tonight, you have his report, and to give the short and sweet summary of it, he does not believe that it would be prudent to put money into that structure. He feels at this time the best value of that structure is to probably at some point in the future decide to sell that structure. He believes that although our plan was sound for the barn, that it doesn't address the ADA issues and other issues of what I'll call is our present offices, and therefore we would be just coming back and putting more money in. From the standpoint of leasing the building by the 3 districts, as you know, Hollis is the owner. The rent right now is pretty much what I would say on target. And for the Hollis School District to bond that renovation, it would be difficult to recoup those costs through rent, and it would be asking one district to bear that burden. What that means is that the Hollis Board, which is our landlord, had already had some discussions at their public meetings just regarding potential next steps. And I think more information will be coming out in the future as we kind of look at that long-range vision of what could happen on that property that would also benefit students in the long run. So there's a ways to go, but I want to publicly thank Dean again for his time and effort. I want to thank Liz and Karen for offering their expertise around this. Rob brought his historical perspective as longtime member of the Hollis board and someone who has done, I think it's either 3 or 4 studies. Yeah, about 4. Yeah, of the building. But we do believe we will be in that facility for a few more years as we start to look forward. So we are working with the Hollis board. We'll be doing some renovations to the bathrooms and things like that to make it a better environment and enhance it as we figure out what to do down the road. So it wasn't exactly where we wanted or thought we might end up, but it was much appreciated to have experts come in and guide us to what would be the best long-term potential. And I'll gladly turn the mic over to any one of the committee members who has anything to add in case I've missed something or misspoke.
No, I just want to kind of connect this dot with like a prior conversation though. I mean, I think we talked about priorities was sort of brought up, and I see the SAU compromise and choose to stay in a building that is far less than optimal and push down a capital investment project several years down the road, even though that spot is definitely not appropriate for you all to be working in. And I think that was probably the hardest part of that committee work for me, was to come to a conclusion that was going to leave you in those working conditions for the foreseeable future. But I do think it really does show the commitment to the SAU to prioritize spending projects, and that one of the things that you're seeing here is we're going to prioritize people over buildings. And that's what we've seen out of Andy and Gina, and that's what I appreciate.
It was definitely eye-opening going on a tour. I'd never been in the SAU building before. And I don't really need to go back anytime soon, so it's okay.
Excellent.
It's a far different experience than if you're just there in the foyer.
Yes.
And just inside the door.
Attic space, I'm not sure about that.
Yeah, we can take you to places in that building that would.
The Hollis board decided to save money by using the bathtub that's being removed as a bollard for a security device.
And I would say that, it hasn't been easy as a district to, see our administration and folks work in that. At one time, it was a very cold place. We didn't even have really good heating, when it's 10 degrees out. And of course, all the additional residents in the walls and everything. I think
the four-legged kind?
Yeah. I think we're at a point where we've extracted just about every last penny of value out of that location. And I think it's about time we start talking and enter discussions into separating with the property and taking a different course. So.
I was just going to add that I forget whether it was in the Globe or another area. I recently saw an article talking about the vacancy rates and things, and just to corroborate what this report says, and they were talking about an average rate per square foot of $8 per square foot in the region, and that's even a higher end region. So certainly the effects of the pandemic have had a strong impact on the market rate, but for the present time, especially in the context of companies who have reassessed their needs to have a physical presence in a building, I think that the information that's been provided here, while eye-opening, is also proving to be accurate.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you. All right, we're moving on to deliberations. No, we're not. We're moving right on to SAU goals.
I just want to take this opportunity because although we've been involved in COVID for the last 2 years, I don't want you to think that we haven't been looking forward, because COVID will eventually move on, or we will learn to live with it, one or the other. So for those of you who may not be aware, at the elementary districts, we did finish our work of Portrait as a Graduate, and I'd like to thank that committee. Under Gina's leadership, that work is done. Unfortunately, the gentleman who led that work was able to secure new improvement in a different role and now is not doing strategic planning. But as many of you know, I kind of enjoy that work. So kind of as a, and I know this sounds weird, but somewhat therapeutic, I jump into the strategic plans on those days where I have an hour here or a couple hours there. So in the next month, you'll probably be receiving a spreadsheet that kind of outlines SAU objectives and how they relate to each of the district with 6 major goals. Those 6 major goals are not new. They are what was in our strategic plan, what our community said was important many years ago, and have been utilized for my entire tenure here to direct us forward. But what needs to be updated on those goals is our priorities and our objectives and our vision. So to kind of kick off, the vision, it needs to start with our students, and Gina has been working in her spare time on kind of a data presentation so we can give you an update in January. Where are we with our students? We know that we had some learning gaps from COVID. We know that remote learning was not perfect. But at the same time, we also saw pieces where some students did very, very well because it met their learning style. So this will give us an opportunity to look at our data, which is the state assessment, some of our Ames web data, some of the data we're getting back from our teachers in their PLC communities and things like that, and kind of give you more of that vision of where we're going. As I've said to you many times, our greatest concern right now is obviously our seniors, because in a few short months, they leave us. And then next priority is the junior class, because the shortest windows have to be our greatest concerns. Whereas our kindergarten, first and second grade, once we know where we're at, we can now plan how to methodically build everything back so they fulfill the portrait of a cavalier that we've spent so much time on. So that is on the way. To go along with that, as Ken talked about, we are finishing renovations in Hollis. So over the last 3 or 4 years, we've done probably around $6 to $7 million worth of renovations and taken 2 buildings and provided them with generations, decades more use. We are going to be proposing what I'll call phase 1 in Brookline, which allows us to focus our attention on RMS, which is probably in the 50 to 60-year-old range, if not older, and start to look at some elements of this building as it has already reached 20 years. At the same time that's going on, at last month's co-op meeting, we provided what I'll call the educational academic pieces that our principals provided to the architect of where the co-op will need to go, and we hope to roll out in January kind of what that vision looks like for Hollis Brookline High School and Hollis Brookline Middle School to address what we believe will be future enrollment concerns, but also to start to address something we talked about a couple of years ago, which is still our goal to move to more of a STEM environment. We believe those are going to be critical field for our next generation of graduates, and very shortly those 2nd and 3rd graders will be those 10th, 11th, and 12th graders. So that's where we're heading with that vision. And obviously, once we set that vision at the co-op level, that allows us to design intentionally backwards. Once we know where we want that graduate to be, and once we know where we're looking at what we're going to offer at the co-op, then we can plan of what does that mean a kindergarten student has to do, or what services can we do that. One of the big pieces that we continue to need to evaluate is our space and our ability to develop in-house systems and programming that will allow our special ed students to stay with us. As the Brookline folks will tell you, on Tuesday of this week, our Director of Student Services came into my office to let me know that as a result of welcoming a new family in, we were going to be welcoming a new line item to the budget of somewhere between $90,000 and $230,000, depending on if that was a out-of-district placement or a residential placement. Those are very large numbers, and one of the things that we're looking to do is continue to break down the Hollis-Brookline barriers from an educational standpoint. So when we look at preschool programming, it is probably one of the largest increases we're seeing from a standpoint of servicing 3- and 4-year-olds. So these are students who have identified, usually with pretty significant needs, that are now attending our schools. They are there with non-handicapped peers to accelerate their social and emotional growth. And I will tell you from firsthand observations, it has been amazing, 38 years of doing this, to see the growth from children this young because they want to belong. They want to do what their friends do. And the minute they see their friends at school, we have children who are, advancing at a very rapid rate. And I believe those children will be able to then, through proper programming and spacing, be able to be maintained and educated in our district. And as I've said on multiple occasions, first and foremost, educating them here, I believe we do an outstanding job. Second, they'll be with their peers who they're probably going to grow up their entire life with, which is critical. And what we will see is cost avoidance. We won't see cost reduction, we'll see cost avoidance. Because instead of a $230,000 placement for a residential placement, that child will be able to come to us, receive in-building services, and in some cases wraparound services for families, as many times we are working with families as we all move together to address these children's needs. We have, in many instances, already seen some of the benefits of our programming at the co-op level. We have less students than we have historically been placed out of district, and because of that elementary program, yes, we do see transfers coming into the co-ops that are significant, but again, the cost avoidance factor is tremendous. And more importantly, those families are happy, their children are happy, and I'll be honest, they are some of the highlights of my day. When all of a sudden a 3-year-old can run across a playground to give the superintendent a high five, can say my name, put on his coat, line up and do those things, and to see a parent picking that child up who didn't know what that future was going to be, or if that child would be able to gain those skills. Many times I think we underestimate how far we can take children. And I know, some people would disagree that we should be educating 3- or 4-year-olds in a public school system. I will tell you, I can't imagine not doing it now after seeing the benefits. So when we look at this vision for Hollis and Brookline, we have to look at this vision as we may offer a particular service in Hollis, and we may offer a different but similar service in Brookline. To utilize our space best, to utilize our personnel best, and to, again, to a lesser degree, avoid cost. But in some ways, we're going to have to kind of change the mindset to what Tom was talking about and continue to morph as much as we can into being two towns, but one educational community. Because when we do that, we provide an outstanding product. And on the other end of that, we have an extremely talented group of, and I'm putting myself in the same category, average students who are going to go on and be very, very successful. That middle group for us needs to be identified, and we need to continue to develop programming for them, while at the same time not diminishing the advanced programming that we have for some of the brightest young minds. It's funny as a superintendent, you never know who you're going to meet, but I had to go to my doctor as I get older and things just keep breaking. It's amazing. And I had to see a new young doctor. That young individual was a Hollis Brookline graduate. I was so impressed. And he didn't know until the end that what I did for a living. And thankfully, he liked school. And he didn't have any real negative things, but I wanted to make sure I was all done with my visit before I told him what I did, just in case. But to see one of our graduates, who actually got his chemistry teaching from my assistant superintendent, and was inspired to go on because of what we do to be a doctor and know that's the next generation that we're raising. I feel a lot better as I do get older, because a lot of times you'll hear people worry about the next generation. I think we're going to be in real good shape, because we're producing a similar product to as many, many places around, at least the state of New Hampshire that I know of, and I think New Hampshire is going to be in really good shape. So I don't want you to sit there and think that we're just all about the pandemic. We do like the plan, we are planning, and there's going to be a lot coming out that I think will be exciting, different, and some of it will naturally have costs associated with it. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, now we're going to move on to deliberations. I don't know if someone wants to make a particular motion. I was going to ask to make the motion to approve the F-23 budget in the total amount of, got it here, $2,107,176. Moved by Cindy, seconded by? Second. Liz?
No, Beth.
Oh, Beth, sorry. Okay.
Could you repeat the number, please?
$2,107,176.
This paper says 103,000? Because of the.
Let me switch back.
Oh, so does the budget go on the expenditures or under the grand total? Okay, thank you.
All right, is there any discussion?
Has the motion been made?
Pardon me?
Has the motion
Yes.
been made second?
I would just say I appreciate the work that has been made to bringing the budget to this state at this time. It's once again on time to get this done. Everyone can appreciate there's a lot of moving parts, not only to bring a SAU budget forward, but a district budget and warrant articles and whatever else we're trying to get in the warrant. So I'd just like to appreciate and recognize the committee for the hard work that they did.
Agree. Thank you. Agree. Anyone else? Are we ready to vote? Okay. do we want to do it by district, or do we want? Yes, all right. We need to do it by district. Amy, are you ready?
I'm going to run the table.
See, Amy, I knew you'd have to do something today. Okay, can we go with the Hollis School District? All those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, 5. All those opposed? No abstentions. Okay. Brookline School District, all those in favor? 2?
There's 4 people here.
Those opposed? 2?
That's a total of 4, yes? Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Co-op School District, all those in favor? Okay. 6? No opposed, no abstentions. Okay.
It passes. Motion
Okay. Thank you. It passes. That will go on to the warrant. All right, Superintendent Evaluation. Cindy, do you want to talk to this, or would you like me to?
I can go real quick.
Okay.
Everyone should have gotten a link to the survey or to the, and I know that it's kind of short and it's crazy with the holidays, but if you could get it in by the end of the month, that helps, because the next thing is the roll-up for the chairs, and I know Brookline, I think their meeting is the 5th, so if they want to try to have any discussion after that, especially the Hollis and the Brookline, the co-op has later in the month, but it just helps so that they have time if they have any problems with the system or anything, that they can talk to the committee before they have to talk to the school board for the roll-up. And then at the end of January, the spec committee will get together and put the full evaluation together, and usually we discuss that in the February governing board meeting.
Any questions, comments?
Do you have a definite date for that February meeting? Is it I think I saw 17th, I just want to confirm that with everybody.
I had one question, if folks have a second.
Excuse me, Tammy?
Can the people who've handled this evaluation in the past, because I have not, comment on how many come in on time, reasonably on time, and how many have to be hounded and then don't make it in on time at all? Because my impression has been in the past that sometimes people aren't doing their homework in a timely fashion, and this is kind of high stakes.
I actually think the chairs would know that more than the committee, right? Because it's that goes to the chairs first, so, and I can't recall.
My uninformed comment is we all need to do our homework on time.
I will say that I remember a couple of times when we've gone to the roll-up, there have been members who have not done it. And I think that you and I had done a roll-up back in a few years ago.
Acceptable.
So, please take the time to do it. It's important. And it is a short form. It's a lot easier than it was 3 or 4 years ago. So, but it does make it really difficult on the chairs if they don't have everybody's participation.
Tammy, I would just add, you're going to love the roll-up process.
Did you look that up? It's the 17th. 17th. Okay. So our February meeting is the 17th.
17th, get ready.
I don't know the yes.
That's our fun
I'm sorry, say it
non-public.
again?
Pardon me?
Were you speaking to me?
Our next meeting is the
February 17th, SAU. So get that done, please. Can we have a process observer?
Yes. I think I'd like to comment that given the scope of the items on this agenda today, we have had an extremely productive meeting. I think everyone except me was succinct, and I think that the public comment was helpful and thoughtful, and I feel the meeting has been run exceptionally, and we've done a lot today.
Okay, great.
And on time.
Thank you. We do not have a need for a non-public today. Okay, all Pardon me?
We do not?
We do not.
Okay.
No. So I will take a motion for adjournment.
Motion to adjourn.
Second by Beth.
Next meeting's February
All
7th.
those
Can we
in
debate
favor?
that? No? Okay.
All those in favor of adjourning?
I don't think so, I need to calculate it.
Usually vote against it.
Are you opposed? Okay.
I did last time.
Thank you very
I
much,
voted
everyone.
against the
Happy
adjournment
holidays,
last
everybody.
time.
Happy holidays.